In the hit Broadway musical Annie, we find that the main character is an orphan who truly lives the hard-knock life. She's living in squalor, is surrounded by poverty, and takes constant abuse from the orphanage's matron, Miss Hannigan, who also happens to be a raging alcoholic. Now, despite these trials and tribulations, Annie finds herself transitioning from the hard-knock life to Easy Street when she's adopted by Oliver Warbucks, the richest man in America. Now, although Annie's story ends with sunshine, for many of the Americans' youth living in poverty, this is simply not the case. According to the University of Michigan's National Poverty Center, in 2008, it was estimated that 19% of America's youth lives in poverty. This translates to roughly 14.1 million individuals. Poverty has many adverse effects on child development, so much so that many researchers have taken it upon themselves to fully understand the adverse effects that poverty has on child's development in an attempt to mediate these adverse effects. One such researcher is our very own Dr. Gary Evans, Professor of Design and Environmental Analysis and Human Development here in the College of Human Ecology. In order to answer the question, how does Gary Evans' research on child development and poverty make a difference in our society, we must first look to two main points. First, Gary Evans' research increases our knowledge base on the effects that poverty has on children's development. And secondly, with this knowledge, policymakers can make sound decisions to successfully and efficiently mitigate these problems. First, we have to understand that this research increases our knowledge and understanding of the effects that poverty has on child development. In a 2004 publication of the American Psychologist, Gary Evans argues that poverty affects children in two main domains, the physical and psychosocial. Now, when it comes to the physical domain, children who are living in poverty tend to live in environments that have poor air quality, increased levels of pollution, and increased levels of environmental hazards and toxins. Not to mention the fact that they tend to live in areas that have high crime rates, which literally makes it dangerous for them to go outside and play. Interestingly enough, he also points out that individuals living in poverty have less access to nutritious fruits and vegetables. Not necessarily because they can't afford it, but rather individuals who live in poverty have a lower chance of living in close proximity to whole food stores that sell these products. However, Gary Evans also points out that the physical environment is not the only environment that adversely affects child development. It's also psychosocial. Individuals living in poverty tend to have less dense and close-knit social networks, report lower interactions with their parents, and also tend to experience high levels of stress from noise and crowding. Now, stress has numerous adverse effects. And in a published paper in 2009, Gary Evans shows that this stress that is experienced in the psychosocial domain can also affect the brain. Now, as we all know, child development is a crucial point of brain plasticity. And during this time, they're extremely vulnerable to any types of change. Elevated stress levels create increased levels of cortisol and catecholamines, which adversely affect certain areas of the brain, namely the hippocampus, which is important for declarative memory. If these children cannot remember their experiences, how do we expect them to learn, achieve educations, and break the cycle and therefore get out of poverty? Now, why is it important to understand this information? Why is it important to know how poverty affects individuals? Well, I hate to sound cliche, but knowledge is power. And by creating this knowledge, Gary Evans is arming policymakers and other influential individuals to make sound policy decisions to intervene successfully. Which leads me to my second point. The research done by Gary Evans actually arms policymakers with enough information to intervene successfully. In order to see this, we'll look to two interventions that are currently being done in both the physical and psychosocial environments to see how this is so. First, when it comes to the physical environment, as I mentioned before, obesity disproportionately affects individuals who are living in poverty simply because they have less access to healthy fruits and vegetables. However, there is a policymaker who is attempting to change this. Our rather graceful and toned First Lady, Michelle Obama, has taken it upon herself to lead the charge against childhood obesity. And in order to do so, she's using the research done by Gary Evans, hinting at the fact that they have less access to healthy fruits and vegetables. By eradicating soft drinks in schools, eliminating processed foods, and increasing the numbers of healthy fruits and vegetables that are available in schools, Michelle Obama is allowing individuals who are not able to access this food at home a chance to live healthy lifestyles, therefore intervening in childhood obesity. Now, when it comes to the psychosocial domain, cognitive interventions are extremely important. However, for the most part, cognitive interventions are focused on the elderly, as we assume that as we age, we forget, and so therefore, cognitive interventions should only be used for them. However, research by Gary Evans has shown that cognitive interventions are essential for childhood as well, seeing how stress can indeed influence the brain and cause cognitive deficits in memory. As a result, some psychologists, such as Carol Dweck, have developed intervention programs that target youth who are in elementary schools, basically intervening at a young age. Carol Dweck is also using the research done by Gary Evans and others, hinting that poverty and children's development in that circumstance have adverse effects on cognition. And by intervening early, we can actually prevent them from having these adverse effects. Both Michelle Obama and Carol Dweck are two policymakers, influential individuals, who are showing how the research done by Gary Evans is being used by policymakers to make sound decisions and mitigate these effects. So when asked the question, how is Gary Evans' research making a difference in our society? The answer is twofold. First, it increases the public's knowledge of the adverse effects that poverty has on child development. But secondly, it arms policymakers with enough information to make sound decisions to mitigate these effects. Now, it's been said that the children are our future, and this is definitely true. However, I would also argue that we are theirs as well. They are counting on us, students, policymakers, researchers, and just anyone with an ounce of human compassion to change their world. And hopefully, with enough research like that being done by Dr. Evans and others, we are one step closer to making the hard knock life a little bit easier.